Good morning, everyone. I didn't write that introduction, by the way. I think it was embellished a little bit somewhere along the way. I really wanted to thank all of you for inviting me here, and thank you for your wonderful warmth and your welcoming spirit. And of course, I want to thank Reverend Hata, who invited me here originally to come here. And so I really say it's a great honor to be here. I was here in 2014 for your Hata service, and so it's really wonderful to be back again. Honko is the annual gathering in Jodo Shinshu temples to express our appreciation for our founder, Shinran Shonin. And so on this occasion of Honko, I wanted to discuss a little bit about Shinran's teaching. And usually when ministers talk about Shinran, they quote passages from his mature writings, such as the Kyogyo Shinsho, which is a very thick volume of his passages that he's quoted from all these teachers, or the Tani Sho, his mature writings. But one other thing that's often quoted are his letters that he wrote in the latter part of his life. All of these things are considered like treasures of our Shin-Buddhist tradition. But today, I'm going to share a little bit about the early life of Shinran, because we have a mixed audience here of a lot of young people, which is really great. And so this is about when Shinran was just a young boy. It's from a book called The Monk Who Dared. I don't know if some of you have read that book. It's a novel by Ruth Tabra. Ruth Tabra is, she's passed away recently, but she was a priest in the Nishionganji tradition, and she studied Shinran's life for something like 15 years before writing this it's like not a true biography, but a fictionalized biography of Shinran, because actually very few details of Shinran's boyhood life are known. But Ruth studied his life, and so after hearing this passage, you might agree with me that this is could very well be what Shinran's early life was like. So, how many of you know what Shinran's name was when he was a young boy up to the age of 9? It wasn't Shinran, right? Matsuwaka, very good. There's an A for that choir member there. She can sing and she knows a lot of details about Shinran too. That's great. By the way, the choir was great. That was really, really incredible. So Matsuwaka, experienced many difficulties as a child. In Buddhism, we say that he had many encounters with impermanence, which is, one of the core teachings of the Buddha. So, to give you an example, when he was only 6, so those of you that are young kids, you can think about this. When he was only 6, his mother passed away while giving birth to his younger brother. That's, really a very sad and very, traumatic experience for him as a young boy. And then, at this time in medieval Japan, there was a tremendous amount of violent warfare between these competing clans. The Heike and the Minamoto clans were fighting over control of central Japan. And the young Shinran Matsuwaka witnessed this violent warfare. It was a very, bloody time in Japan. And then to make it worse for him, his father was involved in a what we call a coup d'etat, or an attempt to overthrow the Heike, but it failed. And so basically because of the failed coup, Matsuwaka basically became a homeless orphan at the age of 9. And this is why his uncle decided to take him to the local Buddhist monastery to have him ordained as a monk. For Matsuwaka at that time, for the young Shinran, that was the only positive choice, for him. In the passage that I'm going to read from Ruth Tabra's book, he has just become a priest at the Shoden Inn temple, and so at the age of 9 he ordains, right? You all know that story. And the name that he has now is Hanen, right? Hanen. And he's only been at Shoden-in for a few months. And his teacher, who's this monk named Shohan, and Hanen, the young Shinran, have to walk together up to the top of Mount Hiei, to the temple known as Mudoji. And this is because even though he's been training at Shoden-in for a couple of months or a few months, he needs to go up to Mount Hiei, which is where all the center of the Tendai tradition is, and he needs to go up there to train. And at that point, his training is going to become much more intense. Very difficult ascetic practices like eating very strict diet, and then tremendous emphasis on meditation and memorizing the sutras and chanting the sutras. So he has to go up to Mount Hiei. But what we need to keep in mind here is that Hanen, the young Shinran, even though he was only 9 years old, he had, as I mentioned, already experienced great difficulty in his life, great impermanence. And I think because of that, at the age of 9, he had already decisively taken refuge in the Buddha's teachings. So just a little while ago we took refuge in the three treasures. You can imagine a young boy having lost his mother, having lost his father, and witnessing basically becoming a homeless orphan. This is the experience of impermanence. And so for him, taking refuge was more than just reciting some words. It was a very strong experience for him, even though he was only 9. I think that's what you'll see. And you'll also see that later in the story, he talks about taking refuge as, quote, becoming a member of the Buddha's household. Becoming a member of the Buddha's household. And I think you'll see why this is significant in the conclusion of the story, so try to keep that in mind. So I'm going to show you some slides to set the stage of this story. So these are from my own trip to Kyoto a few years ago. So this slide here is an overview of the Kyoto Valley. How many, raise your hand if you've been to Kyoto. Oh, wow, quite a few have been there. Okay, very good. So this is the overview of the valley, and then we're going to zoom in to Shoden-in. So this is Shoden-in from the bird's eye view, and then this is the street view of Shoden-in. Have any of you been to Shoden-in in Kyoto? Okay, just a few of you. Well, as you can see, this is not from Shinran's time. This is from my trip to Japan, and so it's a very popular tourist site. So when you go there, it's busloads of people going in and out. This is where Shinran ordained. This is where Shinran ordained at the age of 9. And actually, at the Shoden-in temple is the Tokudo room. This is what they tell you on the tour. This is the actual room where Shinran ordained, where the young Matsuwaka was ordained and became Hanen. And so that little platform there in the center of the room is where they, the priest to be lowers their head, and a elderly priest shaves their hair off. And so that story is covered in Ruth Tabra's book, and it's in it she has Matsuwaka saying, "Well, I didn't expect this. I didn't expect my hair to be shaved off." And so, having gone through that myself, my hair is sort of grown back, but not completely, but because actually I'm losing my hair too. But I went to Tokudo, and I had my head shaved off and my hair shaved off, and it was not my head, but my hair. And see, you can see that I'm still shaken up by it, but it's a very traumatic experience if you're not used to it. So this is the Tokudo room, and then this is an overview of, you can see Shoden-in on the sort of the lower left side there, and then in the upper right corner, it's hard to make out, but one of those yellow markers in the upper right-hand corner is Mudoji. So this is like a 5-mile walk that Hanen and his teacher Shohan had to walk. And then this is zooming into Mudoji Temple. So Mudoji is not actually part of the Mount Hiei complex, but it's considered part of Mount Hiei, but it's sort of isolated from the rest of the complex. So now I'm going to begin reading from The Monk That Dared, from the book by Ruth Tabra, and I think you'll get a very vivid sense of what it might have been like to live in Shinran's time. In Kyoto, the late pale dawn of winter was lighting the eastern sky when, at the end of the morning service, Hanan and Shohan left on their journey. Like yesterday, the weather was cold and windy with intermittent gusts of sleet. It will be far colder on the mountain, Shohan warned. Hanan was ready for it, dressed in layers of heavy winter robes and a straw cloak which had been given to him by Reverend Jien, who had performed the Tokudo ordination for him at Shoden Inn. Hanan pulled on his thick straw boots, tied the saucer-shaped straw hat under his chin, and huddled into another of Jien's gifts, the shawl that gave extra warmth for his neck, shoulders, and chest. Just as they started out the temple gates, a servant rushed up with a farewell gift for Hanan of a sack of chestnuts from his uncle. Hanan tucked the sack of chestnuts into one corner of his bundle. Shohan warned Hanan about being attached to his previous existence at Shoden Inn. You must think of yourself in a new way, he said. That gift is from your uncle, of course, but in the timeless past, all beings have been your brothers and sisters. Your real family is everyone, everywhere. Don't cling to those who give you something you may cherish. Pharaoh gifts are more for you to carry, more attachments. Shohan lectured Hanan. Hanan listened patiently, but he liked that his uncle had remembered that chestnuts were his favorite. Within half an hour's brisk walk, the wintry stubble of rice fields lay on either side of the road they were following. Hanan imitated his teacher, using a staff to keep his footing as he slipped and skidded through frozen debris that was a mix of muck, garbage, and rotting leaves. When they reached the foothills, the air was colder. Ice glazed the edges of mountain streams. As they trudged along, snow etched the fields and the roof thatch of an occasional tiny village. For the most part, the way led through wilderness. This region is notorious for bandits and robbers, commented Shohan, but don't worry, they are not likely to come after two monks who have nothing but the robes they are wearing. But thinking of his chestnuts, Hanan kept a wary eye out for suspicious-looking figures in the snowy brush that lined the road. The actual ascent of Mount Hiei began at the prosperous village of Sacramento. The temperature dropped steadily as they climbed up the mountain from Sacramento. Snow crunched underfoot. Where they were still exposed, the dead leaves of the forest floor were sheathed in ice. Whenever Shohan stopped to catch his breath, Hanan was grateful. His legs ached from the steep climb. Each lungful of cold air hurt when he inhaled. Then, from one of their resting places near the top, Hanan had his first glimpse of Lake Biwa. This is Lake Biwa from 2013, not from... its vast gray expanse looked enormous. That must be how the ocean is, he exclaimed. When the day comes that you see the ocean, Shohan told him, you will know that Lake Biwa is really quite small. Hanan found this hard to comprehend. What a strange world his teacher opened up to him. Large lakes that were really small. Was nothing as it appeared to be? Were his eyes so unreliable? How was one to know true from false, real from unreal, illusion from how things really were? As they climbed, the temperature dropped even more and the forest became more dense. Here and there were small shrines to the god of the harvest, Inari, which was symbolized by the figure of a fox. At each one of these, Shohan paused to bow with his hands palmed together in gassho, just as he would bow before a Buddha image. Foxes are fellow beings, all part of the natural world in which we too were born, Shohan observed. Then at a junction where the trail they had been following split into one path continuing on up the mountain and the other one angling back down, a cascade of snow suddenly tumbled down on him. Above his head, from the branches of a massive cedar, sounded a high-pitched chatter, almost human. Monkeys, smiled Shohan. They have come to greet you. Okay, we are almost at Mudoji, your new home on Mount Hiei. This side trail takes us there. Hanan brushed the clumps of snow from his hat and shoulders. Hello, monkeys, he called, looking up at the three on the branch overhead. He watched them scamper away, leaping from branch to branch, dislodging snow on each branch they landed on. Mudoji lies in a valley. It's a unique place on this mountain, said Shohan. Within minutes, the trail brought them to the valley's rim and a spectacular view. There, Mudoji. A series of cloisters and temples clung precipitously to the walls of the valley, so narrow and deep that its depths were hidden in dark forest. Giant cedars sheltered the buildings. Snow thatched the rooftops. Neatly swept walkways and intermittent flights of steps connected each building to its neighbors above and below. Mudoji was first built by your clan, the Fujiwara, said Shohan. Reverend Jian also trained there. And you? Hanan asked. A strange expression tightened Shohan's face. He took Hanan's question to be asking if he was also a Fujiwara. I am a commoner by birth, he answered, as if to say this was most painful to him. You are one of those fortunate ones, Hanan. You are able to become whatever you wish to become. You have noble birth, a patron like Reverend Jian, and a Fujiwara connection. Have you any idea how difficult becoming a monk was for someone like me? Being born a nameless nobody, I had to prove myself superior in every way. Only by the most inconceivable set of encounters did I become what I am now. Hanan tried not to look as if this bothered him. Is teacher a commoner? Shohan said to him. It makes a difference to you, doesn't it? Said Shohan bitterly. But Hanan quickly replied, you and I, what we were before makes no difference. When we become a member of the Buddha's household, we leave our past identities behind. Shohan looked pleased. Yes, this is Reverend Jian's view and mine. You are an able student to have grasped this at your age. Well, this is the end of the passage that I wanted to share with you. I hope you enjoyed this very imaginative dialogue that Ruth Taber wrote. I think it's quite possibly a realistic portrayal of Shinran as a young boy. We don't, of course, know what he said or the dialogue that he might have had with his teachers, but I think, one of the things you can see from this passage, that if you're familiar with Shinran's teachings, you heard several statements, either made by him or by his teacher Shohan, that are recognizable as Shinran's later teachings, right? And actually, in that very last interchange, didn't it seem as though the teacher-student roles were reversed? And so, and so one thing I wanted to ask you is, what did the young Shinran mean when he said, when we become a member of the Buddha's household, we leave our past identities behind? What did he mean by that? quote, Shinran, or the young Hanen, is specifically referring here, of course, to his becoming a member of the traditional monastic Sangha, right? In our Shin Buddhist tradition, the tradition that we say Shinran Shonin established, becoming a member of the Buddhist household really simply means taking refuge sincerely in the teaching of the Buddha. And sincerely taking refuge in the teaching of the Buddha implies seeing the limitations of the ego self within. You cannot sincerely take refuge in a transcendent teaching, a teaching that transcends human wisdom, with still having attachments to your human wisdom. You have to let go of the human attachments, the attachment to our human ego-centered wisdom, in order to truly take refuge in the Buddha's teaching. And so, from the standpoint of Shinran Shonin's teaching, this is why in Jodo Shinshu, Shin Buddhism, is probably, arguably, the most egalitarian tradition of all the Buddhist traditions. Of course, we do have a hierarchy. We have, Rinmans and bishops and so forth, and Sangha, but from Shinran's understanding, the Sangha is everyone. The phrase is dobo. Everyone is an equal follower on the path to the Pure Land, to awakening. And so when we, recognize the limitation of our self-centered view, I would say when we really recognize the limitation of this human-centered, self-centered view, we simultaneously leave our past identities behind. What that means is the shell of the ego is broken through by the wisdom of the Buddha's teachings, and we are able to glimpse this world of beyond the self, this world of the oneness of all life. So, what the Buddha's teaching opens up for us is the realization that we heard in the story, that all along we are all part of the natural world into which we were born. And therefore our real family is everyone, everywhere. In other words, all life is interconnected. All life is one. When we seriously, sincerely take refuge in the teaching, this is the benefit of the Buddha's teaching. I think, according to this novel that Ruth Taber wrote, The Monk Who Dared, even as a young boy at the age of 9, Shinran was already sensing this oneness of life, already sensing it. And later this teaching of oneness became a cornerstone of his message, absolute cornerstone of his message. So on this occasion of Honko, I sincerely hope that you also find it inspiring, like me, that throughout his life, Shinran always understood that all life is interrelated, all life is one. And what I would say Shinran hopes for us today is that we also realize this truth of oneness. If we can, then our appreciation not only for our own life, but for all the other lives that we share this planet with, also deepens. I think this is the significance of Honko, this opportunity to encounter the wisdom of the Buddha's teaching, the wisdom of Shinran Shonin's teaching. So thank you very much for listening.